ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على محمد النبي الأمين وعلى آله وصحبه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. اللهم واجعلنا منهم آمين. Inshallah, this evening our topic is Allah will have His way, and we will shed some light on the latest in Gaza. When we say Allah will have His way, this is of course our belief. إنما أمره إذا أراد شيئا أن يقول له كن فيكون. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides a matter, it's for Him to say be and it will be. Events, sometimes when we reflect as believers on them, sometimes we understand them, sometimes we don't. Sometimes we can see the hikmah, the wisdom behind them, sometimes we don't. But believers should always have the faith that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the best for you as an individual, for your family, for this ummah, for this community. Given that we will do the leg work. Given that we're going to do the leg work, we have to do the effort. And inshallah, in this evening, I'm going to shed light on certain aspects from the old history. We'll give one example. But contemporary time, we'll talk about Syria, Gaza, and New York, and quickly on the so-called Arab Spring. We'll start with the rise of Islam. And many of you know that the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire have neglected Arabia. They just had given some weight to their agents, Al-Manadhira and Al-Ghasasina, who were on the edges. But inside Arabia, this desert, vast desert, who cared about it? They did not pay attention to it. So it was unthinkable and unimaginable for a tribe in Mecca to start a movement that eventually got to Medina, where two tribes in Medina supported it, that within 4 years, I mean, imagine, within 4 years, to put an end to the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. And in our talk, we are not going to take away from the efforts and the jihad of the Sahaba. There's no doubt that many Muslims became shaheed trying to spread this deen and put an end to those two evil empires. But what I need to discuss is how Allah paved the way so that the cost of this Islam spreading and putting an end to those empires was much less than what it could have been, and how the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was in it all the way. For example, many of you are familiar with Surah Ar-Rum, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Alif Lam Mim, غلبت الروم في أدنى الأرض وهم من بعد غلبهم. Now remember, we are talking in Mecca. This is Mecca. And the Quran is talking about an event that took place between the Persian and the Romans, way away from Mecca, where the Sahaba and the Prophet ﷺ were struggling. This is the early days of Islam. They were struggling. They did not even move to Medina. And the Quran is discussing this issue, that there was a decisive battle. For those who study in US universities and took history courses of what's now called the Middle East, they will learn that there was a decisive battle, that the Persians were able to defeat the Romans and defeat them badly, to the point that at the time it was thought that the Romans would not be able to come back and challenge the Persian. A decisive battle. And the Sahaba, of course, were sad because the people who worship the fire defeated the Christians, who were the Romans. Yes, they were on dalal, they did not believe in the right aqidah, but still they were from among the people of the book. And the kuffar were celebrating. The kuffar were celebrating. What was not realized at the time is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is preparing the ground for the rise of Islam. I mean, the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire, they have over 700 years, imagine, 700 years, fought 1,000 wars. But they still were strong. And they go at each other. Sometimes the Romans won, sometimes the Persian. But that battle by itself, if you read history, they said it really weakened the Romans to the point that observers, historians said, there's not really any chance for them to come back. But the Quran came and says they will come back and they will defeat the Persians. في بضع سنين, in few years, 3 to 9, as the language say about the بضع سنين. So the second battle, where the Romans defeated the Persians and weakened them. So by this time, Islam is still in Medina. It was the day of Badr. And the Quran says, وَيَوْمَئِذٍ يَفْرَحُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ بِنَصْرِ اللَّهِ. And on that day, the believers would rejoice in the victory of Allah. Now some of the Mufassirin said this rejoice, this happiness happened in Badr, because the battle of Badr was at the same time when the Muslims won over the kuffar of Mecca. Within 4 years, the Sahaba, with the main figure radiyallahu anhum jami'an, Khalid bin Walid, Abu Ubaidah Amr ibn al-Jarrah, Sharhabil ibn Hasna, Amr ibn al-As, Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. In 4 years, 15 battles that took place with the Persian and 9 battles with the Romans. And the Roman Empire was finished. Muslims took over Palestine and Syria. Today is what we call Syria, Lebanon, and Jordan, and Egypt and beyond, and the Persian, Iraq, and Iran, and beyond. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared the work, the ground for this deen to rise without the heavy cost. Because imagine with me that if the Roman and the Persian empires were at their peak of power, or below that, but still very powerful. Now, do not, as I said, we do not take from the effort of the Sahaba. You know, too many of them became shaheed fighting because there were hundreds of thousands. You know, the main battles, Yarmouk, Al-Qadisiyah, that we have learned in history. Now, people did not realize at the time the effect of those wars on weakening those empires so that the Muslims would not put too many casualties, too much effort, and too many years. So empires that lasted 1,000 years, in 4 years, they were gone. The Persian, which has much longer history, again, within 4 years, they are gone. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prepared the ground. People at the time did not understand the logic. And why the Quran even discussed this. Of course, for those who need details, they can go, and when Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu anhu made a bet with the kuffar of Quraysh that this will happen, the kuffar of Quraysh said, it will never happen. The Romans are too weak to come back. But that's beyond our story. Because what we need to understand is when Allah wants something to happen, prepare the ground for it. Let's take this to the so-called Arab Spring. I guess many of you, just like me, have lived to see Saddam Hussein and his children, Mubarak and his children, Gaddafi and his children, Ali Abdullah Saleh and his children, and so on and so forth. Not to mention the bigger criminal, all of them have really oppressed their people beyond imagination, Assad and his children. I have came to believe myself that I will live and die and Mubarak and his children are still ruling Egypt. And Saddam and his children are ruling Iraq. And definitely Assad and his children will be still in Syria. And Gaddafi and his children will be ruling Libya. That was my belief. Based on what? On the reality on the ground. If you talk to Abu Umar, said, you know, Saddam will be gone. He said, Ya Akhi, what are you talking about? You do not know Iraq. If you talk to a Syrian and said, brother, give Assad a few more years, he will evaporate. Said, Ya Akhi, you guys, you do not understand Syria. Talk to Gaddafi, to somebody from Libya, said Gaddafi and his children would be in trouble and he will be gone. Said, look, Libya does not even have an army because Gaddafi wants to be sure that there's no coup against him. And he have the tribe, he have the money, he have this, he have this. You do not know Libya. And so on and so forth. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted something to happen, there was some work done. Now, I'm not going to go into political analysis of how the countries and other powers interfere. That's not my point. My point is what we see as weak human beings with our limitation. With our limitation in this regard. And somebody may come and says, well, the children of King Hussein are still in Jordan, the children of King Hassan are still in Morocco. Well, again, this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have a plan. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the best of those planners. The effort need to be made for a change. But when this change will happen, and definitely it will happen, there's no doubt. There's no doubt that when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would want this change to take place, there will be things that will take place to prepare for this change. I did not want to go in details about the Arab Spring. But what I want to emphasize is, give me any reasonable person who understands the politics of the Middle East who would say at one point that, give it another 10, 15 years, you will not see Saddam or his children, Gaddafi or his children, Hafez al-Assad or his children, Mubarak or his children. It can't. Because the reality is totally against this. Now, I do not want to be misunderstood. Saddam was, no doubt, a criminal with what he did to the people of Iraq. But his crimes and his personality cannot be compared with Gaddafi and the Assad family and Mubarak. He have at least some dignity. He at least have statements and action that many in the Arab world love him. They did not realize how the people of Iraq were oppressed and how many thousands, tens of thousands killed and perished with those mukhabarat. Again, that's not my issue, but I want to make this so that people, do you compare this with the criminal Mubarak, with the criminal, all of them are criminals, with what Assad and Assad children? No, there is definitely. This person have some izzah in him, some dignity in him. He stood his ground on many occasions. But still, he's a criminal, no doubt. Just go to what he and his children have done to the people of Iraq and you will see it clearly. And someone should not come to think, oh, he just oppressed the Shia. No. The Shia were oppressed and the Sunnah were oppressed. Many of the ulama of the Sunni were killed. Not just some of the Shia leaders. So let's put this behind us, because some of you, looking at the age-wise, we only can discuss what happened in Syria, in Gaza, and in New York, without repeating some of the details that we have been discussing over the past 2 years. So when it comes to Gaza, the time was 2 years ago, on October 7. What was before October 7? That the people of Palestine were really so down, so depressed, and I talked about that in detail when I went to that Ramadan i'tikaf before October 7, and in that summer, before October 7, people were down. They said, look, Egypt have normalized with the Zionists. Jordan have normalized with the Zionists. United Arab Emirates have normalized with the Zionists. Bahrain has normalized with the Zionists. Sudan has normalized with the Zionists. Morocco has normalized with the Zionists. Turkey has its relationship with them being part of NATO for many years. And even Qatar was among the first to open office for the Zionists in Qatar. They said now there's this talk that Saudi will normalize, followed by Indonesia and Pakistan. So basically, the issue of Palestine is finished. We do not have any leverage. That was the logic. That was the talk. As I said, people were really very, very down depressed that this issue, Muslims have forget about Palestine, and the Arabs have betrayed Palestine. And the people who have hikmah, they said, look, it has been 70 years. How many attempts were made to bury the issue of Palestine and give it to the Zionists? How many attempts were made? So many. Goes back to Abu Gheba, who was the president of Tunisia, who came in the early 60s and wanted to give a big chunk of Palestine to the Jews. I still remember, wallahi, this will be, this is 1963, around that, 1964. I was like 5 years old. I still remember those demonstrations saying, "Doos, doos, Abu Rqayba ya jasus." What's in Qalqiliya? يا أبو رقيبة يا حمار بعت الوطن بالدينار. Abu Rqayba, you are a donkey, you sold Palestine for 1 dinar. Because he's from Qalqiliya, I am from the middle of Palestine. I did not hear the Hamar thing. He's a Hamar, there's no doubt on what he was proposing. But, even, of course, he was not bringing his own ideas. He was working for the British. And this was the British proposal, the same British who made the Balfour Declaration and gave Palestine to the Jews with the blessing of the US and Russia, France, and Germany and company. And even the Al Saud too. That's what the documents show. So the fact of life, people were down that the issue of Palestine, as I said, those who have the wisdom said, no. Allah will have His way. Allah will have His way. It may take, many years, but this thing is not to be there, for a long time. The Crusaders came to Palestine 150, 160 years, they had to leave. Palestine is so precious to Allah, the Creator. You read Surah Al-Isra, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, the land around Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa is a blessed land. And only Allah, the Creator, gave blessings to times and places. Times and places. So He blessed the 10 days of the Hijjah, the last 10 nights of Ramadan, and so on and so forth, and Arafah. He blessed places. Makkah al-Mukarramah, the Haram, Masjid al-Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Masjid of the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and the Masjid al-Aqsa. But with the Masjid al-Aqsa said, الَّذِي بَارَكْنَا حَوْلَهُ. So the land around it is blessed. There are some places that have value and in terms of Sharia, in terms of the Masha'ir, but on a certain day, like Arafah is only for that day. After Arafah, just go to Arafah, you go one day, you see 3, 4, 5 million people, depends how many. You go to Arafah on any other day, there's not a single person there. Unless somebody is a tourist who wants to, what is Arafah? Because Arafah have a value only on one day, which is the day of Arafah. So it's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that chooses to give places and times a value in this regard. So Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, Jerusalem, Bayt Al-Maqdis, and the surrounding, Allah said, we gave barakah, blessing for the land around it. October 7 took place. I went back to Palestine for the i'tikaf on the next Ramadan. Allahu Akbar. I was talking to totally different people. I mean, the emotions was very high. Say, Alhamdulillah, this changed the equation. The Saudis no longer talk about normalization, at least in public they are not talking about it. Pakistan and Indonesia, they are not even mentioning any of this thing. The Zionists were hit very, very hard. They could not even imagine and wake up from this 6 hours before the army came to try to rescue something from the surrounding of Gaza and this and this and that. But they never thought that something, as I said, except for the few in there, some of those ulama, some of those people with hikmah saying, wait a minute, don't give up. Don't give up. Only the kuffar, the people who don't have faith, will give up from Ruhullah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Keep your faith in Allah. And it changed the equation. It changed the whole equation in that area. That's one aspect of it. Somebody may say, people of Gaza have paid very heavy price. And there's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. I mean, we cannot really give this fair share of a talk and discussion of how much suffering. And many of us have kept day to day, and some of People kept even an hour to an hour and a minute to a minute. Some people, even their lives stood as if the zaman, as the time is not moving, because of the horrific things and the genocide that the army have done. When they claim, the Zionists, that 1,200 of their people died, and the result is 200,000 of Palestinians who are either killed or injured. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept them as shuhada and give them quick cure and give them the reward. But the point is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants something to happen. Let's, without going into the details, jump from the beginning of Gaza to the end. Just jump from the beginning to the end. As I mentioned, I was in Palestine last year, and we live in an area where most of the Palestinian embassies, most of the Palestinian ministries are, and also the embassies of other countries, like the Chinese and the Turkish and this and that. But anyway, I haven't seen a single Jew last summer in the whole area. If you want to go and see Jews, you're going to go to Jerusalem or Yafa or Haifa or Tel Aviv and what have you. This year, they reoccupied the West Bank. So the major cities, they were empty from Jewish soldiers. This year, I spent 7 weeks, came back September 10th. They have reoccupied the West Bank, the major cities, and they would every day invade part of those cities and arrest people and shoot people and what have you. Why? Talk of the West Bank now, not Gaza. Because the extremists among them, and there are many of them who are extremists, they thought that the time is ripe. This is it. We have this golden opportunity to do what? Annex the West Bank and made it part of Israel, except for the major cities, because the Israelis were not interested in the Palestinian population to be part of their population. So the major cities will be left. They will still be under occupation, but we do not want the major. They want the land, not the people. And the bulk of the Palestinians lives in the major cities: Hebron, Nablus, Al-Qiliya, Tul Karam, Ramallah, Bira, Beit Lahem, Beit Jala. That's where the major cities, where the bulk of the people live. So they said, this is it. Trump has promised. Trump will allow us to annex and take over the West Bank. So now we will have this as part of the future greater Israel. And you have seen Netanyahu talking about, just as recent as 2 months ago, that he is talking about the greater Israel. What's the greater Israel? It's Palestine, Jordan, Syria, part of Iraq, and part of Egypt. That's the greater Israel that he was talking about. Of course, he was criticized by the Egyptians and the Jordanians and this and that, but this is just talk. So anyway, the plans were made. And among the foremost criminals, among those Zionists, the Zionists, the extremists, is Ibn Gfir and Smotrich. Imagine Smotrich, he is the finance minister. He would say publicly, the Palestinians have 3 choices. Either they leave Palestine, go somewhere else, or they accept those major cities, of course, to be subjugated to us. No complaint, no resistance. No, you are just slaves in this land. We are the masters. You do not have rights. Just like the Palestinians in 1948, they are second-rate citizens. So either leave Palestine, be subjugated to us, or we're going to put a bullet in your head and kill you. That's what Smotrich says. This is the arrogance, al-ulu fil ard that the Quran talked about. Because they have, from the early days, they have no chance of being something by themselves, except as the Quran says, حَبْلٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ أو حَبْلٍ مِّنَ النَّاسِ. The robe of Allah has been cut long time ago since they rejected Isa alayhi salam, Jesus. That was the true Messiah. They rejected him, so they no longer have the faith that they have and the blessing that they had before that. Then came only the robe of the people. So during the 30s and the 40s, it was the Europeans. Imagine Poland gave the Zionists in Palestine, before they established their state, 1 million bullets. That's on the record. And all the Palestinians who were in Palestine at the time is 1,150,000. So basically a bullet for each one. That's just Poland, not to mention others, because basically Europeans want to get rid of the Jews. Europeans have a Jewish problem. They still have a Jewish problem. While the Muslims, all this history, had embraced the Jews and the Christians. They lived in peace with them. In fact, when the Christians were kicked out of Spain, where did they go? I mean, there are many European countries, many Christian countries. Where did they go? They went to the Ottomans, to Istanbul, because they know that the Muslims would accept them and treat them well as a matter of principle. We do not look and say, oh, you know, those are rich Jews. We're going to get their money. Accept them. Like what the president is saying these days. He wants only the Afrikaners to come from South Africa. He does not want those who are ill and sick and poor, as they used to say, bring them. A matter of principle, that's what Islam stands for. It's not, is it in my interest to do it or not? So basically, this mentality of we need to get rid of the Palestinians, get them out of Palestine. And Trump came and said something even further. We need to get the people of Gaza out of Gaza. He said there are many countries, we can distribute them between Jordan and Egypt. They have big pieces of land. Gaza is very small. Want to establish there something like the French Riviera, where only Epstein and his people can go have fun. The regular person cannot afford, you know, those, what they had imagined. Some of you have seen AI-generated videos of their imagination of how Gaza look like. And that's why those extremists among those Zionists think that this is it. Palestine is now in our hands totally, with the blessing of the United States of America. We're going to have the West Bank annexed, and Gaza. In fact, Smotrich have said, this was as recent as about 2 months ago, but a month or so before the ceasefire, that Gaza is this piece of real estate that we're going to divide with the US. This is something that, you know, as if there are no people there. Of course, needless to say, in 1948, 750,000 Palestinians were kicked out of Palestine to Jordan and Syria and Lebanon, and some of them Iraq, and some of them in Egypt and beyond. And they eliminated 600 villages. Now, a big chunk of those refugees who did not leave Palestine, where did they go? They went to Gaza. So more than 80% of the people of Gaza are actually refugees from the 1948 land, in this regard. So for those Zionists, yeah, I mean, they have been refugees. They can continue to be refugees. We're going to kick them out of Gaza. So that was the sentiment, that this is the man in the White House. He did so much for us in the first period when he was president. He brought the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem. He gave us the Golan Heights, as if it was Trump's dad who owned the Golan Heights, said, yeah, just take it. How? What's the logic? Other than might is right. These things would not remain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. Anyway, to make long story short, this same Trump, who they put all their hopes in to give them the West Bank and to give them Gaza, suddenly he came with a plan. Discussing it with some Arab and Muslim leaders in New York, he came up with a plan, as we discussed before, and this plan had 20 points. And when the Arab Muslim leaders left New York in the General Assembly, Netanyahu came, gave his talk in the General Assembly to an empty audience. The bulk of the people left. Unfortunately, some Muslims like the UAE, United Arab Emirates, people stayed to listen to their friend and brother, Netan. Netan, by the way, means rotten. That's his part of the first name, Netan, in Arabic. But anyway, so after that humiliation on Friday at the UN, when people left him to speak to an empty hall except for a few, he met with Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, Drummer, another Khabith person who used to be a U.S. citizen, gave it up to be the Israeli ambassador to Washington. He is as bad, but a person that you cannot underestimate, became the advisor of Netanyahu. Alhamdulillah, he just quit 3 days ago. It was major news in the newspapers and the Israeli press. And with Witkoff, basically 4 Jews are meeting together to discuss Gaza. Right? 2 from the Israeli sides and 2 Jews from the US side. So Netanyahu made the following changes, among others. He moved the lines for the Israeli army in Gaza after the ceasefire, because there was still no agreement on something. But there was a proposal that this is the line, so-called yellow line. So he put it and pushed it to squeeze the people of Gaza in the first stage. Then he removed any reference to Palestinian Authority taking part in what's after Gaza, the day after. And he came to the term that says Hamas will put down their weapons, change it to Hamas will be disarmed, meaning by force, if needed, among other changes. So Trump announced his plan on a Monday. Netanyahu jumped and said, I accept it. We discussed in detail how Hamas came with an answer that was very, very clever. They actually did not accept Trump's plan. What they said is that we are ready to release all the hostages, and we will dig up the people who died and we will give them back. We'll discuss the issue of bringing aid to Gaza and some other issues, but the rest of the points, we do not have a mandate from the Palestinian people to discuss it. So actually they did not accept the plan. Now Netanyahu in Jerusalem, as the Israeli press said, he was expecting Trump to come out and said, Hamas did not accept my plan, therefore the Gaza war should continue. Netanyahu, go and finish them. But he was stunned. An earthquake, shock waves went into occupied Palestine among the Zionists when Trump stood and said, Hamas accepted my plan. The war should stop immediately. Of course, the Israelis did not stop the war immediately. They took a few more days trying to convince Trump that they did not accept his plan. The guy just rode his own mind, as we say in Arabic, ركب راسه, and insisted the war will need to stop. And he said, not just that, I will not allow Israel to annex the West Bank. I mean, that was the major bombshell on the heads of those Zionists. Because they have made all their calculation that they are waiting for a permission, the army is in place, we're going to annex the West Bank. So now, within a few days, the whole picture have changed. The war in Gaza stopped, and they were saying we should go all the way to finish Hamas, get the Gazan out of Gaza, reset. I mean, they had a meeting among those Zionist settlers. They were dividing Gaza. Said, you take this corner, you take this part, you take this part. They were dividing Gaza, you know, I mean, it's already divided. It's already divided. So as a result, Trump said, I will not allow them to annex the West Bank. And guess what? Romeo that is, who have been anti-Palestinian cause and blind support of Israel, suddenly he came and repeated the same thing. Not just that, guess who else came to say it? Lindsey Graham. I mean, can you imagine Lindsey Graham talking about we need 2 states, we need a Palestinian state? So within a few days, condolences were accepted in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Abu Dhabi, in United Arab Emirates. They were accepted condolences for that. It's as if they lost a very loved one. Condolences also were accepted in Riyadh, in Saudi Arabia, and in Bahrain, among others. They were very sad. They said, wait a minute. You know, we said we have to finish Hamas. I mean, imagine. This is Israeli TV. I-24, Israeli TV. Only this past week, which we have heard it before. But this is new. I'm not going to go to history. They said the United Arab Emirates are very upset and mad because the US is giving Turkey and Qatar a say in Gaza. They said Qatar and Turkey are supporters of Hamas. So basically, this is not what we agreed on. Who did you agree on your evil plans? Of course, they agree with Netanyahu. For the past 2 years, some of you have attended this class regularly or saw it on live. I kept repeating that Ibn Salman, Ibn Zayed, Sisi, and the King of Jordan were coordinating with the Israelis against Hamas. And they are conspiring with the Israelis against Hamas. This is a fact. Anyone who denies it does not know the ABC of the Arab countries. I mean, if you just read what was written. War. The book that's called War. We discussed it. The chief of the Egyptian intelligence told the Israelis, my advice, don't go to the tunnels. It's very dangerous for you. Allahu Akbar. He's giving the advice to his brothers. He's giving the advice to the people who I'm not sure what they share. I mean, do they share faith? He said, don't go to the tunnels. So what's your advice? He said, wait. Whenever a Hamasi gets his head above the ground, chop it. Allahu Akbar. That's the advice of the Egyptian chief intelligence officer to the Israelis. This is according to the book War. And this guy has access to the Biden administration, and he went along with the Secretary of State to the Arab countries, and he have interviewed him for a long time on these. Now, Palestinians suddenly, what? The war stopped? They will not be able to annex the West Bank? Hamas is in the streets with its weapons controlling the streets. I mean, something does not add up. It's not the expectation. There is no doubt that the people of Gaza have sacrificed. No doubt. They were patient. Why families, some of the families, 50, 70, 100, 200, 300 of them were totally wiped out? Because as we described, Gaza is very small. So a Palestinian family own a piece of land, small piece of land. They built the house with 7 floors. Each brother have 1 floor with his family. A typical family have 10 people in each floor. So when the Israeli bombed this building, the whole family is wiped out. And then the Israeli army is there, and Hamas in the street of Gaza with their weapons. And in fact, this week the Israeli press is saying that Hamas is collecting taxes on the merchandise that come to the businesses. You know, to their pleasure, of course, to the pleasure of the Zionists, that Hamas is collecting taxes. And they cannot do anything about it. Why? Because Trump is holding a stick. Trump is holding a stick. Who in the world would have imagined this? Who? As we said, the people of Gaza sacrifice. But the change of heart of this man in Washington, D.C., regardless of what you think of him, that's the work of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yes, there's no doubt that he's listening to Erdogan. There's no doubt that Erdogan is playing a major role in this. But again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants the people of Gaza to stay in Gaza. The people of Gaza to have their dignity. Not to surrender to those Zionists as they wished that they will be humiliated and they will be driven out of Gaza to Egypt and beyond. It did not happen. And inshallah it will not. Inshallah it will not. Now somebody may say, but are they silent? Of course not. The Zionists are trying to use any opportunity from day one, try to convince Trump that Gaza should continue the war. They did not accept the plan. Two, as recent as the past 2 weeks, when they killed a good number of Palestinians because they said there's violation. And quickly you will see Trump is sending his son-in-law, Witkoff, because they need to keep this guy in check with his extremist. This is the work of Allah. That's not the work of humans. Yes, the people of Gaza have done their work. But the rest was left to Allah, and He did facilitate this. Allah will have His way, no doubt. Yes, we might see things at the time. We might say how, where the faraj, the solution, the opening will come from. Shifting to Syria. And again, for the sake of time, shifting to Syria. Let's talk about only 2 years ago. Would anybody in his imagination say that the days of Bashar al-Assad are numbered? No. You talk to any political analyst, you talk to any Syrian, said, look, the Russian army is in Syria. The following armies were in Syria. The American army was in Syria. The Russian army was in Syria. The Turkish army was in Syria. The Israeli army was in Syria. The Iranian army was in Syria. And to come and say that a major change will happen, it's not feasible. It's not possible. It's not imaginable. The Russian army is there, and they are on the side of Bashar. And they killed so many of the Syrians to protect Bashar. The Iranian militias and the Iran army are in Syria. And who can challenge those two armies? No one. No one. It was this group that was born out of Al-Qaeda, later become Al-Nusra, later become Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. with Julani as its head. But those people were being protected by Turkey with the agreement that Turkey have done with Russia. Let's put the borders here between those people and Bashar's army. And without really anybody realizing what is taking place, few days, 50 years of Assad family is gone, and gone forever. I mean, some of the people in Syria, wait a minute, no, it did not happen. You go to sleep and you wake up saying, no, I had this dream. Because it's unimaginable. Without October 7, Bashar will be there. There's no doubt. Because October 7 got new realities. The Iran and Hezbollah forces in Syria have to withdraw because they were needed in Lebanon and they were needed in Iran because now this conflict became wider. So they left Bashar to himself and to his supposedly army. And the Russians are looking for their own interest. So Erdogan definitely prepared this Julani, they call him now Ahmad al-Shara', diplomatically met with many people who have influence in the area, including the Russians. And things were ripe for small band of people to go from Idlib and take over Syria under the nose of Sisi, Mohammed bin Salman, Mohammed bin Zayed, and King Abdullah, who were very mad, very upset, and in fact, they did not want to have any relationship with this guy, with his group, until Trump says, you need to normalize and receive him. Suddenly, he's a guest in Saudi Arabia, he's a guest in fact, he met with Trump in Saudi Arabia before he came to the... I mean, can you imagine Julani in Washington, D.C., in the White House? I'm not sure about you. I mean, for me, it's something out of the ordinary. As you know, the Arabic saying that nights are pregnant, meaning there are things that are being cooked that you will see. Layali habala. Or they said that, you know, yalidna kulla ajib. They give birth to whatever is, you know, strange and that. It's the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and there. No, I do not want anyone to say, you know, are you endorsing or not endorsing? I'm not discussing any of this. I'm just saying how wild is it to see Trump receiving a shara' in the White House and saying, I'd like you to see more time to come to visit us. Alhamdulillah, now we are buddy. Come and visit. I mean, only 2 months ago, there were $10 million on his head. $10 million were on his head. Now he's in the White House meeting with the president. You know, I remember, you know, this brings some memories. I don't want to be long, inshallah. We need to finish by 9. Bring some memories. There was, after September 11, the FBI start looking around the country and seeing, you know, who have said something or did something or this and this and that. So they found a lecture by one of the da'iyah at the time, Mr. Hansen, known in Arabic as Hamza Yusuf, talking about the U.S. and what will happen to the U.S. I said, wow, we need to see this guy. He was talking about some of those issues. So they went to his house in California, knocked on the door, said, we need to meet with Mr. Hansen. She said, he is with President Bush in the White House. I mean, imagine, the FBI is going to investigate him. You know, he made a lecture about that Allah will punish this country. So knocking on the door, and his wife said, no, he's with the president in the White House. I mean, imagine that guy goes to the White House, oh, President Bush, we need to talk to this guy. Allah has his ways. Allah has his ways. Allah has his ways. So when things need to come to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He prepared the ground for it. That's what happened in Syria. I mean, imagine, President criminal Bashar al-Assad is talking to the Iranians and to the Iraqis. I need your help. I need your help. I'm not sure why my army is not fighting. I mean, you know, the loser is giving each soldier $30 each month. And realizing that he needs them, he said, I'm going to give you a 50% raise, $45 a month. I mean, how stupid you can be. And he's telling the Iraqis, I mean, this is the foreign minister saying, I have a talk with Bashar al-Assad. He was wondering why his army is not fighting. Stupid. I mean, the army is Sunni, and the leadership is Alawi. And you have been murdering and torturing the Sunni with those machines all 50 years of his and his dad, and you are wondering why the Sunnis are not fighting for you? I mean, the writing is big on the wall. Allah has His way. Because those people get so arrogant that they think that I am in charge. Ana Fir'aun. I am the Pharaoh. I can do whatever I want. And you should not see except what I see. Isn't that what Fir'aun said? لا أريكم إلا ما أرى. Don't have an opinion of yours. You know, I am the one who has the wisdom. You see what I see in this regard. Okay, again, for the sake of time, let me finish with New York. Now imagine with me, in New York City, which has the largest Jewish population city in the world, more than Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. Imagine. Primaries for the Democratic preparation to choose the Democratic candidate for the mayorship of New York. And you have about 10 people on the stage. And this guy is asking each one of them, where are you going to go to visit? What is the first country you will visit? Now, this is not an election for a president. It's not an election for a governor, even. It's an election for a mayor. So the question does not fit, but they started, I'm going to go to Israel. I'm going to go to Israel. I'm going to go to the Holy Land. I'm going to go to the Holy Land till get to Mamdani, 34-year-old young Muslim who says, I am a Muslim, I'm not compromising on my identity. Not that he's Shaykh al-Islam, but he's standing there and said, I am a Muslim, I'm not compromising on this identity. He said, I'm not going to go anywhere, I'll stay in New York. That by itself should disqualify him, because this city, as I said, is mostly Jewish. He went further. If Netanyahu will come, the ICC indicted him, I will arrest him. Wow. What the Israelis are doing in Gaza is genocide. Ooh. I mean, any of this before October 7 would have got this guy thrown out of the campaign from day 1 or 2 or 3. But he stood his ground, and suddenly he won the primaries. And then the billionaires start, the Ackman, Lauder, Bloomberg, and all those Berg start moving. We need to stop this guy. But Allah has His way. Because who are the two guys that were there as a potential to defeat him? They recycle Adams and recycle Cuomo. Two crooks, very well-known crooks, corrupted people. In fact, Adams was pardoned by President Trump. He would have gone to jail for corruption. They joke about him taking free flights on Turkish Air. There was bribes. And this Cuomo guy, 14 women working for him accuse him of sexual harassment and sexual whatever. Those are the women that came forward. So those are the two guys that ended up being potential to challenge Mamdani after the rest have dropped out. Of course, Sleva, the Republican, has no chance. Everybody agrees to this. And Trump said that he has no chance. He has no chance. So imagine with me if there was a very well-respected New York politician who was running in that election. I would say he has a very good chance, given what he have said and what he stood for. But the two people that were there, as I said, two crooks, two corrupted people that people know them very corrupted. So the money start pouring into Adams and Cuomo campaigns. Of course, they tried to convince Sleva and Adams to quit. Adams did. Sleva said no. They offered him $20 million. That's what he said. $20 million to quit. He did not quit. And of course, the results are history. Everybody knows that he got more than 50% of the vote. What really shocked the Zionists in Palestine and the Zionists in New York and beyond is 30% of the Jews voted for him. Just imagine with me, if the people who were running with him were some respectable democratic voices in New York who are respectable politicians who are not contaminated with corruption, I would say that they will have a very good chance to beat him. This is not, I'm not underestimating the effort that Mamdani and this huge effort that they have done in New York. I'm not. But for his stand on those issues, who is with this $20 to $40 million that were poured with President Trump few days before the election, coming and said he endorsed Cuomo. He said the Republican has no choice. He said, he endorsed Cuomo and he will cut funding from New York. And all these things come. Oh, Mamdani is a jihadist. He's a Hamas. He's Tamas. He's Hamas. He's Hamas. And you hear all those labels. Nothing worked. Nothing worked. And you can see that where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has his own plan. Has his own plan. Okay, let me finish inshallah with the latest on Gaza. The issue of the few hundred Hamas fighters are still big issue. Trump sent his son-in-law and Witkoff to try still to come up with a solution. The Zionists are saying, we can work out for them to go out of the country. No country has accepted them. Now they came up with another solution. If the leadership of Hamas leaves Gaza, we are willing to let them go. And now the Israeli press is saying that the Israelis have the fear that the US is not insisting on disarming Hamas. And that's driving them crazy. So basically there's not any a new thing on this. It's still being discussed of what to do with them. The Israelis are trying to use any opportunity to resume the war, but as I said, Trump is carrying a stick. Indonesia announced that they have 20,000 trained to go to Gaza. The main issue now is the Israelis want this board of peace to take over Gaza. The US was getting some pressure from Turkey and other countries to get a UN mandate. And the new bombshell, you see too many bombshells on the head of the Israelis. The new bombshell is that the US have tried many years to put a military base in Palestine. And the Israelis objected all along. Now the US is saying we are establishing a base, military base. And they're gonna put American soldiers in there. Of course, this will not fly with the MAGA people, but it remains to be seen. But this is yet another bombshell, because if the US army is there, basically they're gonna squeeze and say, to the Israeli army, this is what you do, this is what you do not do. And the fact that a high-level US official will go and meet with, this is a position will go and meet with the chief of the Israeli army. So he's going overhead of this political establishment. He's meeting with the head of the army, Zamir, directly. There was an incident, and I close with this, what happened last week. A plane carrying 150 Palestinians landed in South Africa. For 12 hours, they did not allow them to come down of the plane. And basically, the Israeli press start making, big issues. Oh, South Africa is only keep talking about supporting Palestinians. They kept 150 Palestinians, 12 hours, no food, no nothing. It turned out, then the president of South Africa interfered and allowed them, give them permission to debug and get into the country. It turned out that there is this organization called Al-Majd, run by an Israeli-Estonian person who have both Estonian citizenship and Israeli leadership. He is offering to take any Palestinian from Gaza to countries outside for $2,000 or $3,000. So they got 150 people, said, we can take you out of the country. They claim on their website that they are helping in Muslim countries in humanitarian, but the whole thing is fake, because they are not registered in Jerusalem as they claimed, and they are not registered in Germany as they claimed. So it's a mukhabarat, it's an intelligence service at the end of the day. So they were able to get 150 people of Gaza, each one paid, each child, each adult paid anywhere between 2,000 to 5,000. They got them out on a plane from Ramon. Ramon is an airport in the south of Palestine, in Negev. It's 4 hours from Jerusalem. They got them on a plane there to where? To Kenya. And when you say Kenya, there's the UAE connection. They get them out of that plane on another plane to South Africa without any papers, without any stamps. There's no evidence that they left any country. And that's why the South Africans, for 12 hours, were trying to understand why those people are here, where did they come from, on which basis, and this and this and that. That was, if you read Haaretz today, or Al Jazeera or any, you will see it all over the news. They are trying to empty Gaza of its people. Allah will have His own way and will have His own plans. I say this, and I'm sorry, there's not the time for a question and answer or comments, because I already exceeded the time by 2 minutes. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. We'll see you inshallah next time.